There are some questions in the chat.
All right, let me look at them. Did Nixon-Ford wages decrease because Reagan's policies affected the unions negatively? You betcha. The weaker labor was, the less they were able to do it. There's a lot of different factors. Carter, even though he was a Democrat, there was a lot of deregulation going on back then. That was part of it. Some of that deregulation started under Carter. But I think it's that ebb and flow of labor power versus corporate power. Under Reagan, it sort of got about as low as it can go. And if I go back to that slide, let me go back here. So we have, Reagan was down here at the bottom, 25, 43, Bush 41, not much, it was even worse. Clinton took a while to dig out of that hole. It started getting better middle of the Clinton era, but he still had a low average, and it started getting better from there. All right, let me see. So yeah, it's just a partial reason. There's probably, I haven't studied that one, but there are, between the union busting that Reagan did, famously breaking the air traffic controller strike and the deregulation that was going on. I think Reagan also encouraged stock buybacks. So a lot of money went to the shareholders as opposed to the workers in that case. There's a lot of factors. It wasn't one thing. Let's see here. Someone is asking if he has permission to share. They absolutely can. And I believe, and the presentation is generally available to everybody on this call. You can get a link for it. I don't know, was the link included with the email that went out? I'm not sure. Usually it is, or we send it out to the group. So you have the whole presentation. And I know that the slides and recording will be on YouTube. I know Christine edits it a little bit before it goes out there, and we'll do that.
Yeah, okay. Dave, I don't think the slides were in the package, but we can send those out tomorrow.
Yeah, great.
To everybody that signed up on this. I do have a question for you. I saw today that the PPI came in, and I saw in Bloomberg it said that PPI rise less than forecast. The July PPI, that's the producer price index, rose 0.1% from a month earlier, 2.2% versus a year ago. And it says categories that feed into the PCE price index suggest softness. And all of that was taken as good news.
Yes.
Can you kind of expand as to what all that?
Sure. I mean, and that's a measure that I don't use regularly, but the PPI is what they call the employer or the business inflation. It's kind of what wholesalers are experiencing for inflation. So it's sort of an input, if you will, to the CPI, which are the numbers that I shared typically in this group, and I'll share some of them in this other economic indicators section some more. But it's good news for the Fed, meaning they are more likely to cut interest rates. It means that inflation is another data point saying inflation is moderating. And that's good news for prices coming down, not coming down, but at least slowing in terms of going up. You do not expect prices to fall. They will go up at a slower rate. But it's just good news for the Fed. They're more likely to cut in September.
Thank you.
Sure. And the PCE inflation that we'll go into in a little bit here, that's the Fed's preferred measure. And there's a variety of reasons why it's different from CPI. But that PCE inflation is when they talk about the 2% Fed target, they're really talking about PCE inflation, which is usually a little bit lower than the CPI. And because mainly the big difference as I think about it is the PCE involves substitution of goods, meaning if you want to buy chicken instead of steak, that's factored in, whereas the CPI doesn't do that. So there are like four major categories of differences. It's a significantly different measure in how they get to their answer, but it usually winds up running about 0.3 or 0.4 below where the CPI is historically. And that means that we're really close. We're getting really close to that 2% target again. Not there yet, but close.
Okay. And you have some additional comments in the chat. Mark Muse Holland, further comments about the unions.
Mark mentioned, it looks like, or Morris mentioned a defunding of mental health. I don't know anything about that, I have to say. It says Mark Lundholm then said, yes, I recall county mental health facilities closed. They put the loonies out on the streets. What a great guy, meaning Reagan. I don't know, we'll see. I don't know the answer to that. And then Mark also saying the middle class develops with unions. Without them, workers become serfs. Some truth to that. One thing about unions is that they bring up wages, not just in the union shops, but in the rest of the industry, because those other companies have to compete with the unions. So it isn't, people say, well, I'm not in the union, and what do I get out of the unions? Well, when union wages go up, other companies have to not necessarily always match it exactly, but they've got to play ball. Otherwise, their good people will leave, and they don't want that. So, all right.
David, I would say if you are ready, you can restart the presentation.
All right. So let's see.
David, I was looking for a piece of information that I had thought I put someplace. Oh, here it is. Just a couple of days ago, the standard 30-year fixed mortgage rate averaged 6.4% this week, down from last week's, substantially down from 6.73. What's going on that's making that happen? Is that a Fed decision, or is that just mortgage?
Yeah, I mean, there's. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great stat. The interest rates are falling. The people are anticipating the Fed starting to cut rates. It's becoming more real. There's always been a forecast of this stuff, but the Fed is now really starting to hint that they're actually going to cut the rates in September. Meaning, people are now pretty well convinced that inflation is going to fall and keep falling for a while. It's going to fall to that 2% level. I shared that example of the 5 and 10 year investor expectations being about 2% for inflation. So we're seeing that the interest rates are expected to fall, and you're seeing that reflected in the 30-year mortgage right away, because the interest rates just aren't going to be that high, and inflation is not going to be that high. It's going to, the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see the interest rates coming down quickly, especially if you've got a recession scenario where the Fed is going to really lower rates fast. And we'll see what happens between now and September. We've got a couple of inflation reports, which should be fairly tame. We're going to have the jobs report, and is going to be the key. Are we going to see job creation go negative for the first time since December of 2020? Since just before Biden started the job creation, we had a negative month. Are we going to see that again? We could. And are we going to see the unemployment rate go toward like 4.5? The Fed could be really cutting rates fast. So I think that's what's being built into that number. Inflation's going down, so the banks don't need to recover that, right? When inflation's lower, the bank can lower the interest rates, can lower the mortgage rate, and also the prevailing interest rates in the universe are going to be going down in the U.S. And so you're starting to see that.
Can you take your presentation down so everybody can see the Hollywood Squares, sir?
Let's get rid of that.
Oh, I see. Sonny Cohen has joined us. Hey, Sonny, good to see you. You've been coming to these for quite a few years now.
He's got all this memorized.
I study it, and I share it. That's right, bro. And David, your work is just great. I mean, it's really, your bias is showing, but nevertheless, there's data there.
I know I sound like a Republican. I do.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
So to the point that you had mentioned earlier, when I believe Lonnie from Indivisible Skokie asked if she could share some of these, I think all of these slides are available, and I know we go up as NWSOFA, and we follow David, and he will tweet about 3 or 4 tweets a day. A couple of them are shares, but some of them are original. And it's always good to pick one of those up and retweet it out to your organizations and ask them to retweet it.
There was a question earlier about the definition of a job opening. So I'm going to take a look at it. You can feel free to ask questions or other things. I'm just going to take a look so we can actually get that specific BLS definition.
And David, just a question that's filtered into, just kind of went through my brain as you were talking about jobs. Karl has said in the past that there is a once a year reconciliation on the jobs numbers, and it's usually a significant swing one way or the other. Do you have any idea when that happens?
I can look that up real quick here too. I think they do that. I'm going to guess like it's like March for the prior year, but let me take a look. Yeah. So I've got that JOLTS definition. There's a specific position that must exist and work available for the position. It can be full-time or part-time. The job could start within 30 days. And there is active recruiting for workers for that role. So they're actively looking. That's the definition, and I will copy that and drop it into the chat here.
I think every job searcher will also recognize, though, that in spite of that definition and these jobs, and this is, I think, the point that PB was making earlier, and that is that while there's all this frenetic activity, they're not necessarily filling these jobs.
I think, there is this fear of a recession, right? I mean, that special model that I showed after the SOM rule earlier talked about a 40% chance we're in a recession. And you're hearing some corporations, when they're doing their earnings calls or when their CEOs are getting interviewed, they're starting to explain some caution. You're starting to hear it in the CEO lingo. Some of it is they're Republicans, and they are political animals. A lot of CEOs are Republican, but some of it is actually legit. And they're starting to see a slowdown. They're seeing consumers that are getting a little tapped out, that are being more careful about what they buy and what prices they buy. And so I think part of why they're not filling those jobs is some concern that things will slow down and that the Fed might be behind the curve in terms of cutting interest rates. There's quite a few economists that I follow of the liberal variety are saying the Fed should be cutting already. They shouldn't be waiting. And that's you can make a good argument for that. And you can probably make an argument to be a little more cautious. It's not, because the economy is very strong. So you don't necessarily have to cut rates right now, but that unemployment rate's creeping up. There's the SOM rule did trigger. So you can make the argument the other way. So, we'll see.
Art Lundholm, you had your hand up for a bit.
Sure.
David, I had a couple of questions about the housing market. My daughter finally got a job again, but she's back with mortgage companies and so on. That looks like the rates are going to decrease, and the mortgage market's going to probably go crazy. I think people have been waiting to buy. What about the supply and demand issue with housing? What's that going to do? And if they ever get around to getting rid of the student loan things, there's going to be a huge explosion in the stock market. So any comments on those two topics, and what do we see is going to happen, might happen?
These are great questions, and I'm a little rusty on my housing market research, I will confess. And we are due for it. So I will add that to the list for our next month. We will get a housing review in there. I would say, let her live with you as long as you can stand for another 6 months. Let her rent a bathroom, because those interest rates on the mortgages are going to come way down. And, there may be, I haven't looked at it specifically, there may be some good deals on ARMs available, but I'm more of a fixed mortgage guy, but it's one of those things where she's going to see some really favorable rates, and that housing market is really going to open up, as you alluded to, in the next few months. I think it's going to get a lot better. Now, I owe you better information than that, because I know there's crazy stuff happening with like really low inventories and people feeling locked in, because even if they want to sell, they can't if they want to buy a house on the other side, they're going to sell a house, they got to buy a house most likely. The interest rates, the mortgage rates are still very high. So they call that lock-in. There's a lot of lock-in. People are locked into their mortgages because they don't want to go from that 3% mortgage they got before the pandemic to a 6 or 7% mortgage now. But if she can wait, if she can handle renting for a little while, or living in your garage, give her a portable heater. Let her wait a few months. Because I think end of this year, you're going to see rates that are more like 4 to 5. Mortgage rates in that 4 to 5 range, not this 6, 7 range.
Well, then to add another question about it, what's happening with retails? space because a lot of people aren't going back to offices, so they're converting them to housing possibility. Any insights into that?
Well, that one, again, I need to research it for some real good data for you. I will say that it's not easy to convert commercial space into housing. It's expensive. There's a lot of regulation that goes with it. You are seeing the malls going from sort of buying of goods to experiences, meaning you're getting, like, if you take your kids into a mall, you're going to see a big place where they can play, and you spend money to allow them to use the giant jungle gym that's in there for an hour. You're seeing changes in what's in a retail mall or retail store, but retail stores are doing extremely well right now. The retail numbers have been very solid. So, we'll see if that changes, if they start coming down. The Home Depot, I think it was yesterday, said that they're seeing people starting to get pretty cautious about doing home improvement projects. They're cutting back on that. So, keep your ears peeled for what's going on from the different large retailers over the next few weeks and months to see what they're saying. But Home Depot is saying, we're being a little cautious. I think they are notoriously Republican-led, but they are still, that's a fair point that they said to the world. So I wish I had a better answer for you on housing. I owe it. So I will take it as a to-do. And if I don't bring it next month, then you got to slap me, because I'm committing to it right now.
We'll get back into it. But, I question Home Depot's results because, the Inflation Reduction Act money is rolling out to people, and maybe slowly, but people can do home improvements and buy stuff and get rebates. I mean, it's huge money. It's where I'm trying to figure out how it's being rolled out, but I was at Costco again today, and they've got even more electric induction stoves in their retail space. So that stuff is there, and you can get a rebate. I'm not sure how, but we're working on it. But anyway, thanks, David. This is great.
I'm glad you bring it up, because we're overdue for a housing related piece, and mortgages and housing. We'll get it done.
I want to say something on housing. My first house I bought in 1981 and paid 14% interest, and the numbers still work. It was an investment property, and even on a personal house, if the numbers work and it's something you want and need, then you're going to buy it. The percent is not as important as the dollars, because you get paid in dollars, you don't get paid in percentages.
Okay.
So Morris, how long when did you refi?
After 3 years, I went down to 9%. And I thought, boy, I'm a lucky boy.
Yep. And then did you refi again?
Yeah. I think it's somewhere around 5, but that's so little on it now that it's not worth, it's less than 100 on it. So it's not worth.
And I would add, I've been getting calls from my bank, Huntington Bank, wanting to know if I'd be interested in a HELOC, which doesn't, home equity line of credit, which doesn't really work for me. But for some people, in certain situations, things like that possibly could work, and maybe that figures into everything too. So anyway, I'll shut up now.
Yeah, I tend to also pull money out of my houses. My actual personal house is on a HELOC, but it's locked in because I got a low rate, no upfront cost, and locked it in immediately.
I just put, to Morris's point, because I could not answer the question, one of the first places I go to learn housing info is the Wells Fargo economics site, and I put the link there for you. I guess it's Mark Lundholm brought it up. There is, if you go to that link, you'll see a variety of housing market chart books that help explain exactly what's going on in the housing market. Looks like there's one where it says housing reports toward the bottom. It says housing market 2024 in early spring or longer winter. That's probably a good read for you, because I can tell you I'll be using that as a cheat sheet for what I bring to next month.
Oh, and I want to know if Christine has any comments from what's happening at Discover.
You mean in terms of Sorry. What was the question?
Well, it involves HELOCs and housing and lines of credit and all that kind of stuff relating to, I guess, to real estate. Maybe that's not your area, but anyway, that's
it's definitely not my area. And what is fascinating is we actually haven't gotten much news, good or bad, on that. So I have nothing to offer.
My wife used to work there in the Treasury Department, and she took a job at another company maybe about a year ago, I think. It was just shortly before the merger. And so I don't know. I don't have any gossip for you on Discover either. So a lot of people in the finance department left. That was one thing in her area. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, the news today was talking about not taxing tips, and the comment from the economic reporter was it's good politics but bad policy, because it's ultimately possibly inflationary because we lose the revenue. We lose the revenue from tips, from tip taxes, and so the deficit goes up, and that's not good.
That's a fair summary. I mean, I'm gonna grab a link here and drop it in the chat on that. I was reading through something where the difference in what they're proposing, Trump wants to eliminate the tax for not only the federal income tax, but also the payroll tax that goes with it. So that would take money away from what's going into Social Security along with it. And then also, as you said, that because Trump is cutting the taxes more, it's going to increase the deficit relatively more than Kamala Harris's plan, which was just the federal income tax, not the payroll tax. She wants the payroll tax to continue. So she's proposing a lighter version of that. And yes, I read the same thing, bad policy. There's much better ways of designing a tax cut. Like, for instance, a child tax credit. The child tax credit is a much better targeted piece. So
cutting the payroll taxes also cuts your Social Security benefits. Yep. Because the income would not be counting towards your income. The other thing that I want to point out that I have not heard is if an employer stiffs you from your tips, okay, the company is also on the hook for tax evasion. So they have a reason to keep track of that money, because it's not just dealing with a couple of people. No. The feds will come in and hit you with a stick, and the Fed's bigger than you. So there are lots of reasons you want taxes on things.
There's another issue also. I think one of the things Trump wants to do is have no cap on that, so that instead of calling your bonus a bonus, they would call it a tip. So you would have a 9-figure tip to the CEO. And that apparently is something that Harris seems to have figured out and might have an objection to.
Yeah, that's a great point, is the conversion of tip income or salary income to tip income, or wage income to tip, to try to avoid taxes. I mean, that's what a stock buyback is to a large extent, is trying to avoid the tax on dividends. It's not a taxable event. The stock price just keeps going up. You pay taxes, it defers the tax until you pay, until you sell the shares and experience a capital gain. So it's just a way of raising those stock prices without creating a taxable event.
And the capital gains tax break has no cap either. So, and we should never call it a capital gains tax. It's a tax break. So, because it
lower.
Every time a lawyer comes down the halls of Congress saying, "I found a new kind of income," he means he wants somebody else to pay his taxes. So, that if anything, the fastest way to most of the tax changes made in the last 20 years have been done under reconciliation, which has to be tax neutral. So there would have to be a compensating tax, and the magnitude of a tax break on tip income would be so large that you would have to do something like capital gains or have a financial transactions tax to compensate for it. But it's big money.
I think in the article, and I posted it into the chat so you can see it. Ellery, you might be interested in that one. There, the CRFB piece down toward the bottom. It's several $100 billion, and that's assuming that there isn't a lot of conversion of these wages to tips, right? So even without it, it's still a serious amount of money that the Treasury is not going to get, and Social Security isn't going to get if you were to implement the Trump plan. I do think, though, that Kamala Harris doesn't have much choice but to respond to that. I think that we would be mistaken to allow Trump to flank us on the left, so to speak, to do more for workers than we are. So you may see, and this wouldn't be the worst thing, right? If both sides start offering a lot of stuff to workers, and we can figure it out later how to deal with it. We do not want to be in a position where Trump is the policy leader. He's the guy with the great ideas, and Kamala Harris is just following along. I mean, she needs to get her platform out there before Trump starts dropping some big ones. Give you an example. What would happen if Trump said Medicare for all a week before the election? We don't want that to happen or anything remotely like that. So you got to have a platform that is very pro-worker friendly, and you got to get the idea out there that you're going to match if your opponent's going to do something cool. You got to be ready. Now, he's not going to do Medicare for all, but he might go Medicare age 62. Do we want to give him that advantage? Let's not. Trump is not stupid. Okay, he's many things.
He can say anything.
Yeah, he can.
Kamala can say anything. It has to pass through Congress.
Yep. Yeah.
Can I have extra Supreme Court justices first, please?
And it has to pass. And it has to pass through Congress. The only way something passes through Congress is if the president is expending political capital, and if it's just kind of sent over there with a letter saying, "Hello, this would be nice. See you later." It ain't going to pass because nobody's out there with their pointy-toed shoes kicking congressmen all the time.
I have a question on education, because it seems to me that the federal government has been spending less and less on education, and the way it's distributed, the way it's paid for is by local government, which means that poor areas get poor education because it's a housing tax and their values of their houses are lower and their tax base is lower. So it creates a terrible situation where people can't get out of poverty.
Yeah.
As a side question or related question, is there a reason we don't really fix that in Illinois? I mean, we've controlled the legislature for how many decades, and it's still the case that you can live in a very wealthy tax-based district, and you probably aren't taxed at quite the same rate per dollar value of your house as people who live in a poor district, and the poor district probably can't afford as good a teachers.
Paul, that answer to that is obvious. We had a chance to fix that with the flat tax, with the graduated income tax proposal. It was voted down by the rich people who lied about it, and they sold their lie. The wealth tax in Illinois was taken away by the Republicans in 1970 when they did the new Constitution. The only wealth tax they left was the property tax, which nobody can get out of, and is a very minor portion of the wealth of the wealthy, but I bet 99% of the wealth of the not wealthy. So that's a regressive situation in the first place. So, but there used to be a personal property tax on goods other than real property. and the Republicans took it away in the Constitution of 1970. So that the only tax that the local communities have for raising school funds is the real property tax, plus some state subsidies that come in from the income tax, which is by constitutional law a flat tax. So that's why Illinois has such a regressive tax system. It was designed to be regressive, and it works.
I didn't live here in 1970, but can you say some more about how this happened? Did the Republicans actually control the legislature back then?
They
Enough that
control.
we couldn't.
They had a triple play, Paul.
So, and following on with that, I would like to find out what Tim Walz did in Minnesota, because they've got a budget surplus now, but they don't have a regressive income tax either. They made it progressive, I think. And if we passed a referendum calling it the Ken Griffin tax revision, maybe it would pass. What do you think?
I've talked to my state rep, and she's in leadership, and she doesn't think there's any appetite in the legislature to go back for that again. I just, it's a matter of political will, and I don't think they're willing to do it again.
Well, sometimes the people have to force.
That is the point for an organization like NWSOFA and Indivisible to free up that policy space.
I hear you, but it's going to take a whole lot of complaints about the property tax that need to be focused in a different way than the current complaints about the property tax.
And maybe we can get Pat Quinn. Pat Quinn's pretty good at this.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Hold hands.
Oh, well, but he got us Cub, and I'm thankful.
You forgot the map and the map.
Yep. So I wonder, does JB have a plan for this? And, we've got some good people that could do some stuff.
Well, that's a campaign topic, not an economic topic.
The JB plan? Well, I mean, it'd be interesting to talk about kind of what he's done with Illinois. We used to cover Illinois stuff pretty regularly, and we kind of got away from it. But that would be interesting, because I don't know what Pritzker's been doing, but didn't we balance the budget, or aren't we close to it?
There was a discussion recently on one of the stations comparing what happened in Minnesota to Wisconsin. And Wisconsin got Scott Walker, and Minnesota avoided that and eventually got Tim Walz. And Minnesota is prosperous, and Wisconsin is struggling to get back to that. And we need to get them there. But I thought it was a very interesting point, and we had a problem here with Bruce Ruiner. So, but we got away from him. So, anyway, thoughts?
Are you suggesting that hiring people who don't want to drown your government in a bathtub are better for your state? Imagine that.
Shocking.
Completely shocking. It's that graph that David keeps bringing up. It's like, why would you ever hire a Republican to run your government? They're horrible at it. They're horrible for their own constituents at it.
Would you hire any employee who said that they wanted to destroy your company?
Well, I was going to use the hiring a vegan to cook your beef analogy.
Yeah.
We had that discussion at my optometry store. It's like this woman said, I don't believe in whoever the politician was. And I looked at her and said, really, who would you hire? So-and-so. Yes, one of those Republicans. And I said, okay, cool. You have a help wanted sign out there. Let's pretend that I got 10 years experience in optometry. I can hit the ground running. And just as you're about to hire me, I say, but I just don't believe in optometry, and I really want to do my best to destroy the optometry business. Would you still hire me? And everyone behind her shook their head. It's like, really? They tell you to your face. But tribalism is so powerful.
It's great that we're immune from it.
We're just a different tribe.
Well, there's a difference between
I prefer this one.
Cult. There's a difference between a tribe and a cult.
Yes. Yeah, Trump definitely shows the signs of a cult leader because he definitely goes out of his way to tell you that what you see and perceive by your own senses is wrong. I'm hoping when you come to this meeting, we work hard. David and David does an excellent job to say, okay, it's don't believe our lying eyes. Here's the source that you can go look it up yourself. And it's huge, right? You don't
Thanks,
have to trust
Jennifer.
David.
Jennifer made a great comment. Jennifer, I hope you come back. We've got a bunch of interesting programs on NWSOFA, and I hope you find them. So,
Unfortunately, Jennifer had already left.
you already left. She's, yeah. So David, what are you going to do next month? You're going to look at housing or what?
Housing, no, housing for sure.
Housing, okay.
And I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a comparison of the states in or the state of Illinois or Minnesota, but the one thing we want to do is start getting, as the candidates release their policies, we want to do more of analyzing those, meaning the tips example to include that in the presentation, that sort of thing. We want to get more of that in. We started to do that a little last month, but I wanted to cut this down a little. So we actually got done pretty fast because you guys had to just listen to me and not Karl as well. So I spared you another 30 minutes of listening to me.
So
But
Veronica's got a question.
definitely housing.
Veronica's got a question.
Let me look here.
No, it is not always the second Tuesday. You will need to go to the NWSOFA.org website and look at the calendar.
This one was weird because Karl had travel plans, so we moved it up a little bit. But normally, and there was actually a better reason is a lot more was going on in the back half of the month, like the Democratic convention. So normally we do it late in the month so that we can pick up the inflation data as well. But that this was unusual. It's normally going to be, what do we have, Christine? Is it the third
More
Tuesday?
often than not, it's the third week,
Third Tuesday.
Monday
That
or
gives us
Tuesday.
everyone.
So this is good. What do we, well, I'm going to preempt here, but what do we have coming up later this week? We've got Stand With Women, I think, on Thursday night.
Yeah, we literally had someone from New Jersey and from California. So the indivisible email list is getting out, and we didn't go out of. Did we go out of country? Yeah, we did. We went out of country. We got to New Zealand, right? Yeah, we got to New Zealand today, which is pretty impressive.
Do you think they'll vote?
What? I mean, if they haven't been in New Zealand, well, actually, if they still claim to be an American, sure.
Americans vote from abroad. There's a whole program.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're an American citizen, you can vote. For military votes, probably want to keep the ability to vote by mail in a way that actually lets their vote be counted.
Yeah, my sister and her family vote in Sweden. They're citizens. So, yep.
Yeah. Anyway, it sounds like we have run out of things to talk about. So, David, if you'd give me a nice closing to the meeting.
This concludes our August presentation of the Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action Fiscal and Economics Group. Thank you for attending and see you next month.